Every video and episode of the It's Cavalier podcast is made possible by my supporters over on Patreon. If you enjoy the show here today, consider signing up. You'll get early access, exclusive videos, podcasts, member shoutouts, and more. And as always, thank you for watching. I just knew today was going to be a busy day. I just had that feeling, man. When that Lonzo deal dropped, I was ecstatic, jumping from the rooftops, jumping for joy and whatnot. Almost fell down. But this is just another cherry on top, I suppose. I ain't gonna lie. I woke up this morning feeling the complete opposite, right? I thought that Ty Jerome was going to be returning and that Sam Merrill would probably be the one departing, considering that you probably value what Ty brings to the table more than what you do for Merrill, especially after the drafting of Tyrese Proctor. So I was of the mindset that Sam was probably likely to be gone because you're going to elevate some of the younger pieces on the roster. But after the Lonzo deal, this makes a lot of sense. And mind you, again, we don't really know what's going on with Ty Jerome. He still theoretically could resign. And if you do resign Ty Jerome at that point, you're really cooking with grease, right? Your backcourt is really, really solidified at that point, because at that point you'd be talking about Don, DG, Ty, Lonzo, and Craig Porter Jr. As your options in the backcourt. So there are a lot of different options here, but I'll tell you one thing. This is not a bad move at all. You look at what they retained him for, I think it's really good value considering what he brings to the table. There are a lot of people that believe Sam Merrill is just a three-point shot maker, but that is far from the truth. He signed a 4-year, $38 million deal that will help keep him in Cleveland, at least for the time being. I don't think he'll survive the full length of this contract, but I'll tell you what, getting him on good value, that ain't bad at all. 4 years, $38 million. I don't know how you could feel terrible about that. It should not make you feel really bad considering the new CBA and whatnot. That's about $9.5 million, I believe, per year. So good move to get him under contract, especially after bringing in Lonzo. So you have solidified your depth in that regard, and Tyrese Proctor will factor in here eventually, but I'm not mad at this at all. I just didn't see it coming, especially waking up this morning. But after the Lonzo deal, this makes a lot of sense. So for those of you out there that question the motives of Kobe Altman in terms of why would you go ahead and bring Merrill back as opposed to a Ty Jerome, well, I think you kind of just saw it with the Lonzo deal of it all. So it makes sense. You are theoretically going to lose one of them heading into this offseason, and now it's not set in stone, but it's now starting to point much more in the direction of Ty being gone than Merrill. So that's where I'm at. This is good value. I think that Merrill, over these last 2 seasons in particular, has proven that he is way more than just a shooter. And I know I keep saying that, but I have to kind of hammer it into the thoughts of people out there, because there are so many people that believe that that's all that this dude provides, when that could not be further from the truth. He is and has turned into a valuable defender. The problem with Sam Merrill is that Kenny Atkinson and at times JB before him used him entirely too much as the small forward, right? He played in a lot of lineups off that bench as your small forward. And honestly, we have seen Merrill start games there, which is not ideal throughout the entirety of the season. You can get away with it, but I think there was an over-reliance on it. And that is why a lot of people think that Sam can't defend, when that's really not the case. Sam, in terms of perimeter defense, he's about average. He was in the 55th percentile this year per B-ball index in perimeter isolation defense. But where he really excelled at was his screen navigation, navigating screens, making sure that he does not lose track of his assignment. So he's really, really good at eluding those screens out there. He placed within the 93rd percentile in ball screen navigation, which was 41st out of 563 total players that made this ranking, and the 100th percentile in terms of off-ball chaser defense. That is number that he was the top player in that category among the 559 total players that made that list. That is a measurement of how well a defender lowers shot quality and suppresses attempts on off-ball screens, which is adjusted for the average skill level of the offensive players guarded. So Merrill, much more than just a straight up 3-point shooter. We know that that is his number one skill, the movement shooting that Merrill offers you. Whether it's going around screens and shooting or spotting up, he's money, right? He is always a guy that is going to look to put that up with no hesitation. There's no Dean Wade or Isaac Okoro in his game in terms of the confidence out there. He will let that thing fly. And as a result, he's graded very, very highly in numerous categories in terms of perimeter shot making. In catch and shoot 3-point shooting talent, he graded in the 93rd percentile. In efficiency, he was the 74th percentile. In off-ball gravity, which is important, like how much attention are you drawing on the defensive end, or on the offensive end rather, from the defenders, that they know they have to pay attention to you when you are out on, past that 3-point line. Do they have to keep an eye on you? And I think Sam Merrill obviously checks that box, and both the film and the stat sheet tend to bear that out. He was in the 81st percentile in off-ball gravity this year, and overall gravity was in the 69th percentile. So Merrill, he is a connective piece of tissue, not quite the level of a Max Strus out there in that regard, but he is somebody that will not stagnate the ball. When he gets it, he'll either look to reroute it, he'll make that extra pass, that hockey assist, he'll move around. He is a very active cutter. I think that he adds much more than just perimeter shot making, and to lock that up on, around 9.5, 9.8 mil, I think that's solid. Again, this deal, I don't think it means that it's a foregone conclusion that Ty Jerome is gone, but I do think that it continues to add to the believability that is where we're heading here. Now, again, this is all going to be up to Dan Gilbert. If Dan Gilbert says, fuck it, I'm going to, I don't really care what the second apron stipulations are, I'm going to go ahead and pay the tax bill, he can still theoretically sign Ty Jerome because they do have the bird rights for him. But I just don't see that happening, especially after acquiring Lonzo. Now, I'm literally live with you guys right now, so there's all the potential in the world that we could see one of those beautiful Shams notifications pop up on our screens and let us know that there actually has been some news on Ty Jerome. But as of right now, we can only go off of what we have, and that is that the Cavaliers already today have signed Sam Merrill to a 4-year, $38 million contract, and they have acquired Lonzo Ball in exchange for the services of Isaac Okoro. So as of right now, you have some solutions in place. Your offseason is nowhere near finished. You still have a couple of spots on the roster to fill out. You still need to go out and acquire a viable third big, not just a body, not just a Tristan Thompson out there. You need to acquire a viable third big. We already talked about it during the Ball in a Okoro stream. We hope that is a guy like Larry Nance Jr., but it is far from a set in stone type of scenario. So we'll see what they end up doing, but I think this is good. Merrill, for what it's worth, this is good value. So who knows? In terms of what Merrill was able to provide Cleveland with this season, it was quite up and down on the offensive end in terms of like the efficiency of it all. He would round the year out, shooting 37.2% on the season from range, but overall 40.6%. And obviously the reason behind that is that the bulk of his shots come from beyond the arc. It's either at the rim while he's cutting, or it is from the perimeter. That is what you are getting from Sam Merrill 9 times out of 10, often nothing in between, because that's how the Cavaliers have opted to utilize him. And that is perfectly fine because he is not an on-ball option as far as I'm concerned. Is that in his game? It was at the collegiate level, but at the NBA level where things are much different and the Cavaliers already roster Darius, Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, and a number of other players that can, handle the rock. You're not looking to give Merrill many on-ball touches. And I think that's what makes him so very valuable, because he can be effective without the ball in his hands. And you need guys like that, and you need to get them cheaply. And that's what the Cavaliers in this new look CBA, $9.5 million or so for a role player like Merrill, who's giving you 19 to 20 minutes per game. That's not bad at all. That's solid value. In terms of the catch and shoot viability from just this past season, he shot 38.2% on catch and shoot triples. He was 117 of 306 total on catch and shoots. He did attempt 62 pull-ups, but he was very inefficient in that area, shooting just 32.3%. But the gravity, to me, is one of the more important parts or aspects of this. The percentages matter. You want guys to knock down shots, but what matters just as much is having that gravity, making sure that the defense does have to pay attention to you so that it opens up the lane for your drivers like Darius, Donovan, Max, etc. You want that paint area to be unclogged, and Merrill is a big proponent of that. He adds to the gravity out there in ways that many other players on the roster, especially the bench, just don't. And so that is why you look to retain a Merrill, because the options available on the veteran minimum market in free agency probably weren't going to be able to solidly replicate what he adds to the equation. Now, Proctor, right? After the Proctor draft pick, I think many people, including myself, felt like this or that drafting could have signaled the end of the Merrill era, but I'm not mad at this. Not one bit. Not one bit. I would love to see Ty Jerome return just because it adds to the stockpile of guards, but I just don't see everybody coming back. I don't see that being the case. I've already seen one departure in Okoro. We could see another with Ty, but we'll have to remain patient and see what happens. This is just one of those times of year, ladies and gentlemen, where you have to be like right by your phone, or these notifications will fly right by you and you'll miss it. And I think for me, it's always difficult because you're wanting to see when these moves are going to happen, and then they just happen out of nowhere. Like, I don't think anybody thought that we would see news like this today. 2 big moves. I don't consider these necessarily like totally marginal moves, because I think the whole idea, the whole thought process behind this Cavs offseason, if they weren't going to be moving a piece of the core, and mind you, it's still possible for that to occur. It is still very possible that Jarrett Allen or Darius Garland or somebody else is moved. But if it wasn't going to be one of those core 4 players, the key word that everybody was throwing out there, and I myself am guilty of this, is marginal, like marginal moves. I don't necessarily consider Lonzo for Okoro a marginal move. I actually think that's a needle mover. And yeah, there's a fair bit of risk that you're involving in that, but I think it's a risk worth taking. All title runs have that risk, like that luck aspect to them. You have to be out there and be willing to take some of those risks. So I don't consider that one a marginal move. If you consider the Merrill re-signing a marginal move, I guess I can forgive you, depending upon your opinion of what Sam Merrill brings to the table. I don't necessarily consider that a marginal move. To me, if we're talking about marginal moves, I would think free agency and some of the veteran minimum like additions that you could make, or a very, very low level trade just to shed salary so that you could bring in more. But this is where we at right now. And this is not a bad spot, because you look at the depth right now. We already had that discussion during that last stream. But you're looking at the depth and it looks pretty good. On paper, it is not a bad place to be in if you are a Cleveland Cavaliers fan, considering the state of this Eastern Conference, man. I love it. It's good. It's good. Now, if you're looking at the SPO track of it all in terms of the salary for Merrill, which is obviously it's a pending transaction for the 2025-26 season, this looks like kind of backloaded. So they have it at 8.482. Let me see if I can just get this on the screen real quick. But I think that it is definitely definitely worth looking at here. So you got Merrill, who for the 2025-26 season is going to be making around 8.42 mil. You have the 2026-27 season that'll bump up to 9.1, and then 27 and beyond, you're going to be looking at closer to around 10 mil or so. That is good value. That's really good value for his contract. And you look elsewhere here, like now technically you will have 13 players under contract after all of these transactions are completed, because you're essentially swapping Lonzo for Isaac. You got Evan, Donovan, Darius, DeAndre, Jarrett, Max, Lonzo. Let's just slot him in right there. Dean Wade, Jalen Tyson. Chuma has the team option. Craig Porter Jr. is still in a contract. I'm going to not count Naquan Tomlin because I don't factor the two ways into like the standardized deals. So and then you will add Sam Merrill back into the equation here. So you'll have 13 players rostered after this, if my math is correct. So I love it. I say all that to say I love it. I am right there, man. It's 12 to 13 players. But I think this is about as good as it gets. I don't know if you guys can see that. I think it's way too small. But yeah, I just saw that. Sorry, CJ. Sorry. I just realized that as I went back over to the screen that graphic actually was showing incredibly small. But yeah, it is a scenario in which the depth should be fine. So even if you're just talking about it in terms of your rotation, right? Darius Garland. Well, let's go through it without Darius Garland right now. Without Darius Garland, it is, I would assume the Cavaliers will not likely attempt to start Lonzo. And this is just my opinion. This is pure speculation. I honestly hope they don't try and throw Lonzo out there in the starting lineup. I would start Donovan Mitchell, Max Strus, DeAndre Hunter, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen. That would be the starting five enter the year, assuming Darius Garland is not healthy. My primary bench rotation of 8 to 9 players or 9 to 10 players would probably be something like Lonzo, or you can, Lonzo or Craig Porter Jr. You're looking at potentially Sam Merrill, right? Jalen Tyson, Dean Wade, and hopefully the third big, which we hope is Larry Nance Jr. And you can sprinkle in some Tyrese Proctor and Naquan Tomlin when you need to. And then when Darius Garland comes back, your bench becomes that much better because you can slide Strus back to it. And so you have some viable options there. Now you are losing some offensive firepower. If you do lose Ty Jerome. That cannot be questioned. He was one of the best offensive players on the roster, one of the most efficient this year. So that's a big loss. But I do believe that you can make up for it. And at some point, you are going to have to see what the young talent on the roster can do for you. And I think what better way to do that than to start elevating some of these young guys. I think that even prior to Lonzo being acquired, even prior to Sam being re-signed, you are probably already going to pencil in Jalen Tyson being involved in some capacity in that rotation next year. You had a real good shot at seeing Naquan Tomlin being a potential replacement for Dean Wade at some point. Now, consider Dean Wade is actually on an expiring contract. If I'm not mistaken, this is his final season until he hits unrestricted free agency next offseason. So the Cavaliers, I don't think they're going to end up resigning him. It's possible, but I think what likely happens with Dean is that he has moved mid-season, same way that we saw Karis Karis and George be moved in the DeAndre Hunter deal. And we already know Karis was on an expiring deal himself during last season around the trade deadline. So I think what the likely scenario here is that the Cavaliers, they fill out the rest of the roster with capable vets, maybe one more move or two, or maybe one more move in terms of trades. But I think they'll roll into the 2025-26 season with Dean Wade still on the roster and contributing in the early going of the season, but also looking to see what can we do to move on from him, whether that be elevating an internal option like Tomlin, who I think profiles as a 4 at the NBA level, or giving, using some type of combination of Jalen Tyson, DeAndre Hunter there. We'll see. We'll see what ends up happening, but we got better. We got better. When you make these moves, you hope to get better. You hope to be on the right side of it. And for Cleveland, in any Isaac Okoro deal, one of the things that I was hoping was that it was just not going to be about shedding salary, which a lot of people were thinking that it could be. Like, we weren't actually going to get a viable rotation piece back. We were just looking to duck the second apron. That wasn't the case. We got Lonzo back. We did save $1 million in the process. With the re-signing of Sam Merrill, you do get another rotation piece back. And it's right, not like you went out and had to acquire that with shelling out additional assets, or you had to come out of your pocket deep to do so in the free agent market. You had one that was already one of your own free agents. So, good move. I think it was deserved. I think Sam, this was his first major payday in the NBA, and he worked his ass off for the last 2.5 years while in Cleveland. For those of you who don't remember, I believe Sam Merrill came to Cleveland in March of 2023, I think it was. Yeah, he signed a 10-day contract. That is the start for Sam Merrill in Cleveland. He signed a 10-day contract on March 3rd of 2023, and then he got his deal converted to a standardized deal to remain with Cleveland, a multi-year contract, if I'm not mistaken. And the rest is history. He took advantage of the opportunities that were afforded to him during the 2023-24 season, where we saw a lot of missed games from the combo of Evan Mobley and Darius Garland, and he benefited from that. Last season, he put up a the 2023-24 season, he put up a career best 8 points. He shot 40.4% from three-point distance on really good volume at 5.8 attempts per game. That remains a career best for him. But during the 2024-25 season, he still brought that same perimeter spacing threat, albeit a little less efficiently. And it was quite up and down for him. When you look at the splits of it all, Sam, it just kind of goes to show you that the latter portion of the year is when he really started to kind of take off in terms of efficiency. Pre-All-Star break, Sam Merrill shot 36.1% from three-point distance, 39.6% from the field overall. Post-All-Star break, in those 26 games, he shot 39.4% from three-point distance. So right around that 40% range, which is great for Merrill on the volume that he was giving you. He drilled, if I'm not mistaken, 50 triples, 50 triples in 26 games post All-Star, and was a plus 10.8. He adds to the equation in ways that a lot of people just don't think he does. He's more than just a shooter. I don't think it is a bad deal. I don't think it's an overpay. I just think it's the reality of role players in the NBA these days. I just don't think I just don't think that people take that into consideration. But with that being the case, let's go ahead and hop into the chat. Reef Gang says little much for Sam, especially since it means losing Ty. 4 for 24 or 28 sounds better. I mean, the reality is that Merrill was not I think his valuation was in like the $8 million, $9 million range. I think there was actually a piece on that was released. So I don't think that's necessarily it was ever really something that was realistic. I think it was always going to get something starting at least in the sevens. So I think that this makes sense for him. Makes a lot of sense. We'll see whether or not he actually stays the entirety of that contract, and if the Cavaliers still have him playing that same type of role, or his minutes increase or decrease. But I think as far as like modern day contracts goes, this is pretty reasonable. I don't think it's like Jetty Osman level contract. If you guys remember the deal that they handed Jetty during the tumultuous era in post LeBron, it just was not good. It was not a good look. So it's far from that. I think that contract really pissed me off back in the day, but I understand it. For those of you who don't remember, Jetty got a 4-year, about $31 million deal. Merrill, for what he provides you, and he provides you more than Jetty, in my opinion, just purely from a like on-court perspective, not necessarily just the statistics of it all. Sam Merrill is a more valuable contributor than Jetty was. So it's a great deal, in my opinion, to retain him on that value. Cleveland sports fan says Sam Merrill is my man. Yes, this is a good one. I am not mad at this at all. No cap. OVO says we lit. Believeland, Sam Merrill. Screech De Niro says, glad Sam the man is back. J Quest says, big up Sam, the Mormon missile getting paid. Hey, he deserves it. Like he has been a valuable contributor. And listen, the whole team shot very poorly in the 2024-25 postseason. Sam Merrill, for what it's worth, in the 8 games that he did appear in, shot 35.9%. And I believe he actually was one of the more efficient Cavaliers in that series in terms of the perimeter shot making. I have to look it back up, but I think that he was actually among one of the more efficient shooters from beyond the arc. Yeah, during the actually, you know what? Nope. Scratch that. In the 4 games that he appeared in, he shot 33.3% from 3-point distance. But compared to some of the other options on the team, that actually still stands out because Donovan Mitchell was terrible from beyond the arc. Max Strus struggled. DeAndre Hunter, Evan Mobley, and anybody else out there. Well, Evan Mobley was actually one of the other players on the roster, albeit on low volume, who shot very efficiently against the Pacers in that series. So I don't know. I think you needed to retain him. Then this makes a lot of sense to me. Charlie Atherton, thanks. Appreciate that, man. Says it's a good move, but dang, I am going to miss Ty. Yeah, me too, man. I do and will as well if he does not return. Joe says really good value. Love Sam's effort on D last year. Did he lead the team in charges drawn? Yeah, I believe he did. That's a stat. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I would need to go look that up. That's a great thing to go look at, the hustle stats of it all, especially over the course of the season for a player that is not seeing nearly as many minutes as some of these other guys. So I love it. The leader in charges drawn this year, by the way, was Tumani Kamara in terms of charges drawn per game. In terms of total charges on the season, let's take a look here. Cleveland, we got, yeah, he did. He led the team. Sam Merrill drew 9 charges this year. By far the leader on the Cavaliers. When you look elsewhere, again, Tumani Kamara led the entire league. He had 3 times as many with 31. Hell, Austin Reeves had 22. B. Potts had 20. Jalen Brunson had 20, et cetera, et cetera. But for a bench player to be able to go out there and do that, that's pretty dope to me. No Cap says clutch Merrill. Ehindo 23 Gaming says let's fucking go, dude. Idea Main says no fucking way. Way overpaid. I don't think so. Look at the contracts that are being handed out. I think a lot of people like still have this idea that $8 and $9 million is a lot of money for a serviceable role player. That's not a lot of money, especially in this new CBA. It's really not. I don't think they overpaid. When you look at his valuation, it's right on par with what I think some of the guys out there at ESPN, and I think Keith Smith was one of the people that point this out as well. But the valuation for Sam Merrill in terms of free agency on the open market was right along the lines with the deal that he actually signed, and it makes sense. It makes sense to me. So hopefully you guys don't think this deal is terrible. Uriah says, does that mean Jerome is gone? I think it more than likely signals that they are okay moving on from Ty Jerome because of the addition of Lonzo, but it is not a foregone conclusion. I just want to put that out there. He still can be re-signed, but this is all dependent on whether or not Dan Gilbert wants to pay that huge luxury tax bill that will be thrown his way in the event that he does. Truly. Kirk Davis says, let's go now. We need a backup big. Come on now. I'm right there with you. Yeah. This is crazy. Absolutely crazy if you're going to try and re-sign Ty and Merrill in the same offseason. But I just don't think that'll happen. Does Ty re-sign? Do you think we still flip Dean or Allen? Asks Mr. King 562. No, I don't. I say no to both of those tentatively. I think Ty Jerome is likely gone. I think that Dean Wade and Jarrett Allen are still likely to stay. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be looking at deals. If you can acquire a player that better fits the roster or the rotation rather by moving a Jarrett Allen or a Dean Wade, I think you look at it. I think you explore those options. But I don't think the likelihood of that happening is all that large right now because you would have to acquire a different type of player with each move. If you move Jarrett Allen, you now have to probably get two centers because you don't want to truly rely on Evan Mobley to be the only center on the roster. That's really it. So that's why I don't think Jarrett Allen will be moved. Dean Wade, on the other hand, it's all about what he could get you back. Now, one name that keeps being thrown out there is Nick Richards. I think that if it is a deal with Phoenix, you have to likely include a 13 because even after the Kevin Durant trade that sent Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green to Phoenix to match salary there at around $54 million, even after they acquired Mark Williams during the draft, they're likely to be over that second apron. So the trades haven't been finalized. Yeah, they can try and move some additional pieces in that to try and get under the second apron, but the chances of them being under the second apron by the time the Cavaliers would be trying to make a deal work with them, I just don't think the likelihood is that high. And what that means essentially is that they can't take any more salary on, much like the Cavaliers. So any deal that you make with a team out there, you're salary matching or salary dumping. So I don't know. I think they're more than likely to acquire a veteran big via the free agent market than they are during trade or with a trade, but we'll see. We shall see. The Tribe of Judah says, when was the last time the Cavs had this much space on the floor? It has to be 2017 or 2016. I thought they had a lot of spacing last year. They just failed to knock down the shots. Like Evan Mobley turned into a really productive perimeter spacer this season, and he was really good from the three-point line in the playoffs. He was among the playoff leaders in terms of overall three-point percentage. Evan Mobley actually shot 45.2% from three-point distance on 3.9 attempts per game. So good volume, mind you, almost 4 attempts per game. That's great. So you didn't really have the spacing issues in the front court. Yeah, technically, if you want to say that Jarrett Allen's still a problem in that area, I don't think it's as big a problem if one of your big front court players is spacing the floor, and Evan Mobley was doing that. So I thought that we had a lot of floor spacing this year. We led the league in that area during the regular season, and entering the first round, we were like 1-2 with Indiana. I just think it all came crashing down in glorious fashion come that series. So we'll see. But yeah, I get the point that you're making. I truly do, because during that 2017 or 2016 seasons, there was a lot of players that went through Cleveland's that went through Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, whether that be Kyle Korver or you're looking at other guys out there, James Jones. And these are years prior, right? Not just 2016, 2017. There was a lot of different players that suited up for Cleveland during that second LeBron tenure that could actually shoot the ball very, very well. Even Mike Miller during the 2014, 2015 season. Steph says Dallas, but you can make it PJ for Strus in 2 seconds, and it's very understandable trade. Honestly, if you're not bringing Ty Jerome back, I think that you need to be able to get somebody productive on that bench. And I think that when the year starts, Darius Garland is probably not likely to be healthy. So in my opinion, I think you should start Strus. But when DG comes back, I think if you slide Max Strus to the bench. So I think that you could probably create a potential problem that or more problems by moving Strus than you would by actually solving them. His salary might look enticing to some teams out there, but for the value that he does bring you, I would question whether or not it would be worth moving him. And that's not to say he's immovable, but it would have to be a very specific deal. And I just don't think that I would do that for PJ Washington over in Dallas. And I think on paper, I actually don't even think that actually works from a trade perspective because of the salaries. Since we're already talking about it, I might as well go ahead and plug the numbers here, but I don't think that actually works on paper without some additional maneuvering. So Strus straight up for the 2025-26 season is making about $16 million. PJ Washington is actually making 14.1 or so. So Spotrac says that that is possible as of right now after some of the moves that Dallas has made. But I would wonder whether or not they would actually be interested in that. That's the thing, right? To me, that's the big thing. Would they actually be interested in a deal like that? Time will tell. It is certainly interesting to think about because it does solve some of the problems that you have, but I just don't know if it would be worth it because you're creating an additional problem. You really are. Cedric Taylor says if Allen can get at least one consistent mid-range close to the paint, the Cavs would be unstoppable. It would be awesome. It would be awesome. Jeremy Johnson says, what's Channing Frye doing these days? Outside of giving Jarrett Allen and DeAndre Hunter and Darius Garland grief for their postseason injuries, I don't know. We'll see. Road tripping, I guess. Mr. King 562 says, how much does Dean make? Well, entering this final season of his current contract, he is actually going to be making $6.6 million. The problem with Cleveland is that they are a second apron team, meaning that they are going to have to match salaries with any team post trade if you're planning on aggregating said salaries. So if you're moving just Dean Wade, the type of players that you're going to get back for Justine Wade probably not going to move the needle. There are some out there that I would at least inquire about, and that's why Nick Richards was thrown out there if Phoenix conduct attacks or you can get a third team involved. But many of these potential trades that Cleveland would likely be making involving a Dean Wade, if you're intending on bringing back a rotation caliber piece, would probably have to include some type of third team. King Mamba says 3-teamer with Sexton to Dallas. Maybe there's been some reported interest there. Strong like Bull says J.A. and Strus for Gafford in Washington. That is an intriguing option that not sure if either team goes for, but I like the creativity. LT says we need 20 productive minutes a night from Sam and Ball. I think you get that. Ball, right? If you don't over exacerbate him, if you don't overuse him, I think he can give you 15 to 20 minutes per night. I think Sam Merrill, if he falls right into where he was this year and the year prior, you'll get some productive minutes. You'll get some productive minutes. CJ says, I have a feeling Porter Jr. is on the way out in a way, and that makes me sad. I wish we had a better shot at the backup point guard. Lonzo is better for sure. I understand what you're saying. Strong like Bull says 100 million for Sam. Please discuss that. Listen, in terms of the tax bill, that is all a Dan Gilbert problem. Frankly, I don't care. I'm not paying the money. You guys shouldn't care either. It's about whether or not Dan Gilbert feels as if the product that is on the court is going to be worth the additional money that he's going to pay. I'll leave it at that. There are players that you probably could have tried to look for and ask to try and make up for what you would be potentially losing if you did not re-sign Sam. But in the grand scheme of things, the market was pretty dry. The free agency guys out there right now, the guys that will be potentially available on the vet minimum, not many, if at all, could actually realistically acquire and affect the game in the same way that Sam Merrill does. And that might sound crazy to a lot of you people out there listening, but I don't think it's sacrilege to say so. I just think that people massively underrate what he brings to the table. The free agent market, though, in general for 2025 offseason, it is not great. It is very, very watered down. And for the types of guys that are going to be available for around the veteran minimum, you just have to understand, like, the options ain't flush. It is really, really rough going out there. I mean, the market reads as follows. If you're just looking at purely shooting guards, which I think that is where that's where we'll go for classification of Sam Merrill's shooting guard. The options towards the back end that will be available for around the veteran minimum. Gary Trent Jr., which that is not necessarily a given that that he'll sign on the dotted line for the vet minimum. Seth Curry, I think that there's a lot of speculation that he could be joining his brother over in Golden State, but that is, it's a lot of up in the air. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is probably going to be somebody that is highly sought after. Don't see that being an option. Gary Harris, could he be an option? Who knows? But I think I'd rather take my chances with Sam Merrill over that. Luke Kennard is a free agent, unrestricted free agent, but I think he is far from veteran minimum level contract status. I just think that people have to be realistic about what we could look at. Landry Shamet, Josh Christopher, Damian Lee, Alec Burks, Garrett Temple, Amir Coffey. These are the types of players at shooting guard that they would be looking at on the open market. If you expand that just to forwards in particular, it doesn't get much better. We're looking at old friend Lamar Stevens, Kevin Knox, Braxton Key, Jeremiah Robinson Earl. But those are more so, especially in the case of Robinson Earl, he's a power forward. Not a lot of options out there at small forward even that the Cavaliers could realistically afford for the veteran minimum contract. Not a lot, man. And that's putting it mildly. Maybe Jayshawn Tate if he signs for the vet minimum, but he's a completely different type of player than Merrill. And that is why I say we just have to understand that it's not about it truly is not about that tax bill. If Dan is willing to pay the money to retain him, then let him pay it. It is not our problem. It truly isn't. Jay Dias says fans be annoying over us losing Ty and signing Sam, but honestly, like both moves. I understand why people might be upset about all of this. All I can say is that, have some faith. I think you take that risk for Lonzo in regards to Isaac, moving Isaac for Lonzo 10 times out of 10, especially for what it cost you. It was essentially, as of right now, a 1-to-1 swap. Does not appear to cost any additional draft capital, if I'm not mistaken, but I guess that could change by the time the deal gets finalized. Strong Like Bull says, wonder how DeAndre is feeling now that his buddy is leaving. Probably not that bad. I mean, he's on a championship contender. And Ty, I feel bad, but at the end of the day, it is you got to understand that sometimes these things happen. It's a business at the end of the day, and I wish him the best. He could potentially return, but I just don't think he will. I truly don't think, after watching the moves that have been made today, I just don't think that's going to happen. Mr. King 562 says, Emoni stays in the gym. Hope he gets meaningful minutes this season. I've had a lot of conversations with people about Emoni Bates lately, and the one thing, the consensus that I've come to is that he ain't ready. I think that if you're going to see Emoni Bates this season, it's going to be sporadic like it was last year. And that's putting it really nicely because you have barely seen Emoni Bates since he was drafted. Emoni Bates, if I'm not mistaken, has played 10 career games in 2 seasons. I think that will likely continue to be the case. Nothing against Emoni, but I think that some of the players that are working against him in terms of that hill, that positional hill that he is trying to climb, is going to be insurmountable, especially if you're looking at including Jalen Tyson in the rotation. So I do think he'll get and this is again assuming that he is actually brought back, because right now he's not under contract. If he is brought back, I do think that it's going to just be sporadic. It won't be anything meaningful, rotation wise. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. I just don't think he's ready. And I'm trying to be as candid as I can. I still believe in his long-term potential, but he's only 21, and I think there is still time for him to mature into the type of player that can be useful on a playoff contender. But for a title contender, I don't think they can afford him many opportunities, if any at all, right now to develop on the fly. But I get the allure with him. The 3-point shot making, that is a skill that he possesses. But again, what we have seen from him has been a ton of inefficiency at the G League level. That's it. Michael McMahon says, any more on Rockets center Londale? I think, is that who you're referring to? Jacques Londale? Read they were going to release him and would be a veteran minimum guy. If Londale became available, I still think the number one target for me would likely be Larry Nance Jr. on the vet market, but we'll see what they end up doing. Jeremy Johnson says, you think Utah would trade Keontae George or Walker Kessler? Not for what Cleveland could offer. I mean, what do you send to them? I guess that's the question. His price tag seems to be extremely high. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. I think that's probably a good place to leave it at. There's one more comment that I just want to address here. Manuel Velasquez says, I just don't understand why you pushing so hard for having Larry Nance back. He's not a real center. He's not even a good shooter. We are better off without him. Manuel, I would consider Larry Nance Jr. a center at this point of his career, considering that is where he played the bulk of his minutes over the last couple of seasons, both with Atlanta and New Orleans. You just have to understand that guys, as they start to get older, have to pick up some type of skill set that allows them to remain in the league. And for Larry Nance Jr., who has been sapped of some of the early career athleticism, his way of doing that was, sliding over to the center because he still has enough mobility to be effective there. And again, this is a guy who has played 62% of his minutes at center last year. That is by far the most of any reserve player that we have, right? That includes Dean Wade and DeAndre Hunter. He played 98% of his minutes for at center for the New Orleans Pelicans during the 2023-24 season, 81% the year prior. So the moral of the story, he is a center at this point of his career. But again, if you don't believe me, check out some of the film, watch some of the videos that I have made on said topic, and understand that he did shoot 44.7% from three-point distance last season on rather decent volume at 3.2 attempts per game. That's right in line with what we got from Evan Mobley. Do you consider Evan Mobley a terrible three-point shooter? I don't. I think Mobley is actually taking some steps. So got to understand what we're working with. And in terms of like guys who can actually play viable playoff level minutes, how many other options out there available for the potential veteran minimum can actually do that? Again, I think what we need to do is, before we start making comments like this, is look at who is actually available. Now, we can talk all the live long day about how we want size, but if you took one look at the veteran minimum market, the guys available, none of them are playoff worthy bigs. I have a video out right now on Bismack Biyombo. I think he would be a valuable addition, at least during the regular season, but even he is not a playoff lock. You're looking at Alex Lynn. You're looking at Paul Reed, Jericho Sims, Charles Bassey, Jackson Hayes, Thomas Bryant, Luke Cornett. Luke Cornett may or may not be available, but again, these are gambles. The market is not flush. That's it. So for anybody out there complaining, you have to understand the options. They're not great. And that is why I keep saying Larry Nance Jr. needs to be brought back. You got to understand who can actually go out and affect the game. And if you're talking about Larry as this undersized guy, I encourage you to watch the film, because at the end of the day, what Larry Nance Jr. brings to the table is versatility, positional versatility, floor spacing. He is still a solid rebounder, still a very solid defender at that spot. It makes a lot of sense. And he can pass. So we'll have to see what Cleveland intends to do. But I'm not all that worried that they won't be able to get something done, because we've been worrying these last couple of weeks that Kobe Altman hasn't been able to accomplish anything. And guess what? He just went out there and made two pretty helpful moves in the acquisition of Lonzo and retaining, at the least for now, Sam Merrill. And Tyrese Proctor was a solid pick. These are some good moves. So I have no doubt in my mind that we'll figure this out. And we do have a couple more spots on the roster. If they want to bring in a 4-5 and then a true center, they can do that. They can go both avenues. But I think you would be think you'd be hard pressed to find a more valuable contributor on a veteran minimum contract than Larry Nance Jr. We'll see. Time will tell. Go Cavs.